can with what it's got to give the TV experience, at least, a little closer to reality. The NHL took a different approach. They just covered up all the seats and put in all the sounds. And unless you're looking in the stands, it's hard to tell the difference, except there's no huge roar when somebody scores. So,
well, in NFL football, there are roars.
Major League Basketball.
Yeah, did you watch any basketball games?
Did I watch basketball?
Yeah, are you a basketball fan?
No, I'm not a basketball fan at all. No, I mean, I appreciate the talent it takes to play a game and the physical shape you have to be in to play it. It's just not my game.
Right. Well, fascinating stuff, that's for sure, Nick. It's
I'll watch hockey. Yep, as the old saying goes, we live in fascinating times.
We live in interesting times.
I think that's an old Chinese curse.
It is. And, speaking about Chinese, Nick, I understand that the Chinese government, or the People's Republic of China, or whatever they call it these days, Red China, is Communist China,
yep.
Right, has taken quite a hit in the public opinion polls. That their popularity has sunk considerably over the last number of months.
To put it mildly, I'm just looking at some graphs here. There's a story put up by, Made for Minds. It's basically the stories about a Pew Research and poll piece about the opinion around the world of China. And let me just give you a few of the numbers. In 2002, 40% of Australians had a negative impression of China, compared to 52% that had a positive view. As of 2020, it is now 81% don't like China and only 15% do. In the UK, the numbers are from a high of 65 positive view down to a low of 22. And in 2002, it was 16% didn't like China, and now it's 74%. And you can run down the list. There's not a single country out there in this. In Japan, it's as high as 86% don't like China, although that's not surprising given their history. Canada, we are up to 73% of people think that China's a bad place and a bad government. Maybe not a bad place, but a bad government. Same thing with the likes are down to 23% from 58%. So over about an 18-year period, they have dropped dramatically in the eyes of the world. And it's not surprising. And I think part of the reason for that, a lot of people blame China for COVID. And I must admit, I think that is a reasonable attitude to have. But there's also, it's not just that. You have the stories about the internment camps where vast numbers of people have been interned in slave labor camps. Some have gone to so far as to say concentration camps. You've got the situation in Hong Kong. There's a lot of things that China's done in the last 20 or 30 years that have a negative impact on its perception on the world stage. Now, the question could be asked, well, so what does that mean? At least to me, and I'll get your opinion on this here in a second, from an international perspective, it matters because China does not like to lose face. They don't like to be embarrassed. And they are definitely losing face on the world stage. It makes it harder to negotiate deals. It makes it harder to set up trade agreements, you name it. But domestically, it doesn't mean a thing. China is a communist dictatorship, and until there is some kind of overthrow of that government, hopefully peacefully, but I doubt it, it'll probably take a violent revolution or something to get rid of them. It's not going to change a thing internally. Externally, big difference. internally, no difference at all. Okay, your turn.
Yeah, I think that you're correct in your assessment. I don't see. I first of all, culturally, I think that the Chinese government is very concerned about its reputation, and the term you used is saving face. I think that as a cultural matter, that's a big deal for the Chinese and the Chinese government. What are the ramifications of that? Would it make negotiations on contentious issues easier or harder? Is anyone's guess. Intuitively, I tend to think that it would make these negotiations probably a little easier, but that's just, I don't have any reason to say that other than, my own sense of logic, if you will. But internally, from a domestic point of view, I don't think it makes a bit of difference. I think that the Chinese government is hardline in many ways. I don't think anyone should be fooled about it. I think that the governing elites who have access to the riches that are generated, the revenue that's generated, the wealth that's generated by these government-owned and operated mega corporations, are quite happy to be playing in the Western free market because they have a direct benefit therefrom. But I have no belief I don't believe that they care one iota about the conditions of the average citizen of China. They're deathly afraid, I think, of allowing, the free market to open up domestically within China itself so that everybody has the opportunity to derive a benefit from free market capitalism. So, but the thing I keep hearing, Nick, is that, well, China has a hybrid economy. They have part capitalist and part communist or part socialist. And I'm thinking, no, that's dead wrong. China doesn't have a hybrid economy. China has two economies. They have one economy, which is more or less free market, that is accessible to the powerful elites who run the government. And then they have the rest of the country, which still struggles under a Soviet-style communist political / economic system. And, even going back to the old Soviet Union, that was really the way it was. If you were in the upper echelons of the government and, or you were a party bigwig, you had access to economic benefits, not really free market, but you had access to goods and services that were made available to you by virtue of your ranking in the party, as opposed to, did you work hard and earn more money than the next person. And so they had stores in Moscow, for instance, that were only accessible, only open to party members or high-ranking party members, as opposed to open to the general public. So, it just goes to show you, these all of this talk about equality of the masses and stuff like that, at least those of us in the Western free market, capitalist world, at least we're honest and we understand that, there is going to be such a thing as economic disparity, and that's the natural state of things, economically speaking. We're not, we try to do the best we can to mitigate the difficulties experienced by people who might be at the lower end of the economic scale when they're there, but we don't buy into this pipe dream, this myth, this fantasy that the world is perfectly fair and perfectly equal, or that it can be, or that it ought to be, because that's just not the natural state of affairs. So, anyway, that's my China rant for tonight.
Well, if anybody out there wants to know what kind of country China really is, I mean, they get mad at the United States for having capital punishment, right? And the Americans do execute a certain number of people every year.
In some
but
states.
They have a legal system that can take what's that? And it's not in every state. You're right. China, conversely, has a national, like the provinces in China do not have any say, to the best of my knowledge, over who gets executed and who doesn't. The governor can't come in, or the provincial head of the provincial, I don't know what to call them, whatever their provincial version of the state government is. Let's call them a legislator, regulator, grand poobah, whatever you want to. He has no say in it that I'm aware of. In China last year, executed over 251 people, but the true number is a state secret. You can't find out exactly how many people were put to death in China or for what. So it's not the same thing as Western countries that execute people where everything is above board. People know. They go to trial. They have a trial. They sit on death row sometimes for years while appeal after appeal after appeal is made. And even in the very last second, the governor could pardon them or at least stay the execution. In China, it's not like that at all. So this is a country that rules through fear, intimidation, and isn't afraid to use either of those things up to and including executing you if they feel you are a big enough threat. So you don't see, it's one of the reasons why you don't see very often political protests. The most recent one of any significance I can think of in that country was way back in 1989, Tiananmen Square. Over 200 people, if my memory serves me correctly, were executed after Tiananmen Square once all the international cameras went home. So it's not a country that it's a beautiful country. It has a long, steep, and rich history. Called a deep culture, fascinating history. But since 1949, it's been one of the worst places on the planet to live.
Okay, Nick, and with that, I think we're going to have to call it a night, Nick. We're coming up to 2 hours now, and so it's been interesting, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you tuning in and catching us on the podcast, and make sure you tune in next week. Hopefully, we're going to have a few significant changes to our broadcast quality and reach as we continue to grow the show, and we thank you for your loyalty, your feedback, your participation, because so far this show is what you've made it, for better or worse, and we're just looking forward to opening up the show to
better.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to throw that in, just tongue-in-cheek, being a little bit humorous, Nick.
All right. Well, with that said, I think it's time for us to say goodnight, Joseph.
Good night, Joseph.
Which means all I've got left to say is, Ubiqueritas et amor, Deus sibi est. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.